a number of years ago, and it's going back many, many years, one of our old sisters, and she was up in her 80s, was in hospital at Providence. It's now a little company, belongs to Providence West on Lomita Avenue. And one of the nurse's assistant came to her, a young fellow, and he said, you know, sister, there's a man dying. He told her where he was. If I got a wheelchair and propped you up and got you comfortable, could you go and stay with him? Could you spend some time with him? And she did. And she felt that it was one of the greatest experiences that she had in her life. Now, I did say to give you a little bit of history. You know, the hospice, not as it is, it has been in existence for thousands of years. If you look back at the monasteries, and you see, you talk about the St. Bernard dogs in the Alps, and the monasteries, the monks, the monk physician, the nun physicians, the monasteries, the convents, were places where people could go and could be comforted if they were sick or to die and be given the care that they needed. So it's not a wholly new one. And this gentleman, Richard Groves, he and his wife died. Yes, I need to speak into the phone, thank you. He and his wife did an awful lot of research throughout Europe and northern France and other countries. And they found that there's a great history of comfort and support for the dying. And this goes back thousands of years. And a vision from the past, God's Hotel, L'Hotel Dieu, if some of you are French here. Nicholas Robin, the founder of Hotel Dieu, in a place in France. It's pronounced Beaune, but the name, it's spelled B-E-A-U-N-E. He asked the Pope and the Emperor for money to build what is a beautiful place for the dying and particularly for the poor. And here's something that has been what he said. The only measure of a society's greatness depends upon how it cares for the poorest of its poor at the end of life. And this was a magnificent place that he developed, he built. It was a hotel, and it was for the poorest of the poor. And at that time in history, this was around the 15th century. You know, it was going through, it would be around the time of St. Joan of Arc. And you had the wars, the 100 Years' War. And there was terrible things happening. And out of compassion for the poor, who had the worst plight of all, he got the best architects, beautiful mosaics, and this is a magnificent place. And I think it's still there today. And all of the different religions have, the Tibetans, they all have had a way of caring for the dying and to look after them and to look out for them. Now, I did say to talk of the spiritual, and I was going to come with ways to help the people, you know, the comfortable ways. There's so many ways in which you can when people are dying. And you know, contrary to, while we have so many accidents, so many tragedies, and so many people are killed all at once, over 80% of people die in their beds. And that we are prepared for it, or can be prepared for it. And when we talk of the spiritual, and as I said before, the spiritual is not necessarily the religion. And different quotes that I have here, and I think one was, it's a Celtic one. What is the cause of pain? To heal your pain, you need to lean into the cause of the suffering. Because there are underlying problems there that causes this suffering. And you can only get it through the spiritual. And a very, very important thing is that how much the dying have to teach us. And we need that calmness, that quietness, that time with them. And I just read a story recently in Desert Call. It's a magazine, a quarterly that comes out from the Carmelites in Crestone, Colorado. And this woman was writing about her experience, that she and her daughter and 2 companions who happened to be physicians were going to do a hiking tour in the Alps. And they started out very early one morning, and as they were going along, they saw something, the bus was kind of in a different position on the road, and they realized there was something wrong, so they were stopped. And the driver of the car went up to see what was happening, and he came back quickly to tell them what had happened and to get the 2 doctors to come and help, because a motorcyclist had crashed with the bus, and he was obviously in terrible pain, and so both doctors ministered to him, and then the driver of the car tried to get the emergency there to come. They had to come in by helicopter. And while the doctors were, the daughter went and got the fleece jackets they had, 2 of them to put over the doctors, and 1 to put under the head of the young man that was suffering. And she went, the woman who wrote the article, went up to see what was going on, and then she realized there's nothing I can do. And she started on her own doing a breathing exercise, and to do it with the young man to help him. And by that, and then finally the emergency came, and they took off and went on their way. And she knew the moment he died. And she tried to find out later on and discovered, yes, he died at that moment. She took her last breath with him. And the importance for some people, cultures, and I was talking of this with Dr. Jeffrey earlier, that in other countries, Europe in particular, we don't have the aggressive means of saving a life that you have here in the hospitals, and not necessarily the emergency. And this is how it is. That one of our sisters, she had been the president of our teacher training college, and because there was a change in the political scene and they were taking it over, the government was taking over the running of these colleges, she decided she would go and become what they call in England a barrister, a lawyer here, and she wanted to go and work with the poor to help them. So she did all of her training, got her, we call it her wig, her barrister's wig, and went on her way, made a retreat, and as she was leaving the retreat, she took a wrong turn, and there was a very, very bad crash, and she was, I suppose, maybe I don't know how long she had to live, but she did not survive. But many, many weeks later, a young couple came to one of the convents, and they apologized that it had taken them so long to do so. But the one message they wanted the sisters to know is that she did not die alone. We were passing by, and we went and we stayed with her. So many, many people have this of being companioning the dying. And there's a whole lot of things that they have here that in this particular book, the American Book of Living and Dying, gives you a lot of stories. And it's a book well worth reading. Now, I'm going to take for this, and this is not a new one, the hard choices for loving people. And if I may read from you the spiritual nature of the struggle of dying. And sometimes we are depriving ourselves because the person who is dying has something to teach us. And it's through that quiet, and any of us that we have, that we go through it. And it's trying to find out what the cause, what's causing the pain, what's giving them the agony. And it says here, although a few may have these questions about God or religion, we all ask the deeper spiritual questions as we contemplate the end of life. When I say spiritual, try not to think of religion, a place of worship, or an organized way of thinking about God. I am using the word in the broader sense of that which gives life ultimate meaning. Spiritual in this sense denotes that essence of ourselves that is greater than the flesh and bones that we inhabit. We are confronted most profoundly with our spiritual nature when someone we love is dying or does die. After the breath of life has gone out and the blood no longer gives vitality to the flesh, what is the meaning of this person's life? Sadly, most people spend much of their life avoiding this ultimate question. We surround ourselves with things and activities to make the reality of the truth of our impermanence. We grasp onto life and our loved ones who are on the edge of dying. But the grasping can bring as much spiritual pain as the dying itself. And this man is just saying, many times I sat in a hospice team meeting as we discussed a family who was struggling so hard to hold on. And I think if we look at it from the spiritual side, we'll be more comfortable with letting our loved one go. And I know in the hospice, I volunteered with hospice for a while, and one of the things they would tell you, please tell the person it's okay to go. Go towards the light. It's all right. And it's one thing to comfort the person. And I got the cue that we're about finished. But leave you with two things. This gives, I shouldn't do that. We have the two experts here, so they'll give you all of the answers.